The Galactic Union was never more than a name, a loose association in which the various interstellar bodies met and talked, more of a social club than anything else. It had no power, it had no authority or agencies. It was nothing more than one single space station that held the 100 or so odd intelligent species from around that part of the galaxy. Permanent diplomatic presence, with the diplomats all living on site, various planets and empires all providing for their own personnel, and supporting it financially and materially by lottery. It did have one thing going for it, however, and that was that it facilitated vast cultural exchanges, and any ambassador who liked something another culture created tended to rapidly popularize it back on their home worlds. In short, a social club and a cultural exchange nexus. A lot of interstellar negotiations took place there on an unofficial basis, but the only thing that had been agreed upon in the last, ever, was that it should be a war crime to target Taran young. Most of the galaxy's species found this bizarre. They formed friendships, yes, but it was those that were intense. The idea of caring so much for quickly replaceable young was staggeringly unusual. Similarly odd was the natural divisiveness of the Taran species. The meme, "Let's start an argument. This is a rock," with a picture of what was obviously a rock, resulted in great confusion around the quadrant, particularly as they saw humans actually arguing over it as if that were done for fun. Equally bizarre was the Taran tendency to unite as quickly as they divided, with horrifying results. The Pankin were now regarded as endangered and had not launched anything into space except for soldiers in service to the fight against the Massives. A dreadful fear of the danger of space was born from their experience against the Keelan Confederation and their war ape allies. Now it was questionable about whether they had a future off their own worlds. It was into this environment that the admiral and revered speaker of the Taran's Grand Armada cast his speech calling for unification. As if they had timed it, the Taran Cultural Exchange Division released the totality of human history, culture, art, and music, from sub-Saharan Africa to suburban Los Angeles, from Milan to Tokyo. A cultural blitzkrieg was unleashed on the Galactic Union, an offering of friendship, a sharing, a gift, and a warning. Unspoken, perhaps even unintended, but it was a warning nonetheless. Do not fuck with war apes. The history of the Tarans was one of conflict. With peace, the gap of time between two wars. Born from surviving two near extinctions, having won the battle for survival on a world with 5 major mass extinctions overall, rising to become an apex predator on a planet that casually obliterated walking and swimming killing machines. The offer of unity peacefully carried with it the unstated fact that war apes had emerged to travel the void between worlds, and it was easy to be at their side and at their back and hard to be in front of them. The common population of most species didn't truly grasp this. For them, the stories, the music, the art, all these things were simply new and unlimited media for consumption. Anything less unified than the Zalia swarm was interested in that. And the Zalia were the first to say, unity is good, with total control over her population growth. The Zalia queen recognized how much her race could benefit from unification. Peaceful expansion and a whole other swarm to call on. How could she say no? The other races, the minor ones who lived too close to the border with the Massives or other larger nations or empires, also quickly jumped on board with the idea. A way to traverse the stars without fear, new worlds could open up, new trade lanes and new opportunities. The Keelan Confederation wasn't far behind, and from there a domino effect began to take hold. Consumption of Taran media, ideals, and the ever-present promise of total security under an amalgamated empire was too good to resist. And no people wanted to be the odd ones out, let alone surrounded by voices who were on board. But while that was going on, the fleet continued to return ships to the Massives. On the view screen was a scene being transmitted across the cosmos, a massive asteroid ship careening toward another massive world and causing untold catastrophe. There was a beautiful, terrible simplicity to the Taran admiral's approach. I don't have to take their worlds, I have to disable their worlds. If I do that, we can go back and take them anytime. The Massives are hardy, big, strong, but they're not invincible. and a total collapse of their planets through environmental destruction will do the trick just fine. So, on they went. The Massives had their great ships, harvested from many asteroids around many worlds, hollowed out as needed, but otherwise the rock left over from the formation of planets was mostly intact. Jump to jump, system to system. But the Massives had many, many worlds, ample time to raise another fleet. Hence, the Allied advance paused periodically to take on more ships. Soaring through the endless void, the Taran admiral watched the viewscreen showing the ever-growing fleet and listening to the tally of electing worlds. He raised his brow when he heard that the Pankin remnant voted overwhelmingly in favor of joining the Galactic hegemony. Seeing the Terrans recreate the KT extinction might have helped. The Keelan, the Zalia, one by one the larger empires voted, or otherwise decided, that the lesson of the massive invasion would not need to be repeated. It's the threat as much as the promise, Great Master Urlanish said in conversation with his sometime Iurlian rival, as they sat around over drinks in the Grand Space Station. On the view screen, the War Ape Admiral was pointing to another massive world, and one of the ships that was previously weaponized hit, and the world cracked. "How many Massives do you think were on that world?" the giant fur-covered Great Master asked, his short snout exhaled briefly. "Not enough for my liking." The Iurlian's feathers ruffled. "Not enough?" He dipped his beak in the long glass to drink. "They'll be more endangered than the Pankins soon, but then, that's the point, isn't it? Shatter the biggest and most destructive empire in the quadrant, then talk about unity. They're expanding more all the time. Who ever heard of using clones from home to settle new worlds?" "You're rambling." The Iurlian smoothed his white feathers and then went back to drinking. "You're not wrong, but you're rambling. Another 100 years, maybe less, they'll have more colonies than the Zalia. If the whole quadrant unites, maybe we can finally find out what's out there in the great beyond where even the Massives couldn't reach." Dreamer. "But I can't say the idea doesn't have merits. Free trade between all planets and—" He was cut off when the real-time view screen showed the unexpected. The asteroid ships of the Massives, hundreds of them. The War Ape, far from fearful, had an expression on his face that the rest of the galaxy had started to refer to as War Ape Bloodlust. Play some music for them. Nobody should die without good music in whatever passes for their ears. Triumph by Tapanese. Oh, and raise the alarm for our allies. Tell them it's payback time for the terror the Massives exerted over this quadrant. We're going in first. They can do whatever they want. A moment later, he took his seat in his command chair, strapped in, and said, "Open a channel to the Massive Admiral." Back on the station, the buzz was clear. Are they really serious, transmitting all this? Show-offs? But the admiration, the eagerness to watch it unfold from one species to another, was clear. The Massive Admiral appeared on the Taran Admiral's screen. "Are you coming to offer us your unconditional surrender?" the Taran Admiral asked. "Of course not! What stone submits to meat?" the Admiral asked, affronted. "Every mountain we've ever climbed." The War Ape answered, "And now it's your turn to be mounted. And since you're not going to surrender, and you're about to learn that even rocks can break, there's one thing I've always wanted to say. One of my favorite authors from the 21st century wrote of an occasion where a noble champion attempted to challenge an invader to a duel, announcing his name, his status, and drawing his sword for the clash against the woman known as the Mother of Terror. Can you guess how it went?" The Massive Admiral seemed more confused than anything, looking behind him at his crew. The War Ape laughed. "She completely missed that he'd even offered the duel, gutted him, and moved on without noticing. But as she charged, she said to him, 'What I say to you now, fuck thee,'" he bellowed, killed the transmission, and bellowed over the comm lines, "Break those rocks!" The sub-light speed rods were fired off by the hundreds as the Terrans began their attack run. Far, far from the battle amidst the stars, votes were being tallied, decisions made, and as the quadrant watched the Taran war apes go howling into the void as if they were born there, and so, unafraid to die in it, the first galactic hegemony was born. What kind of bullshit war cry is that? The Zensha ambassador asked his comrade, while the Galactic Union members sat around watching the fighting unfold. Fuck thee? How undignified! He sniffed with his long nose upturned. It makes more sense than yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. We still don't have a proper translation for that, his companion uttered with a roll of his long eye stalks. Oh, I don't know, the Iurlian answered when he sat down to join his companions. It may be crude, but that's humans through and through. They can be as reserved and dignified one minute, bloodthirsty the next. They're civilized war apes. Whatever they need to be, they become. Don't you know anything about the human homeworld? No, not really. I've heard it's absurdly dangerous, though, the Zensha ambassador muttered. I'm friends with the Keelan Confederation ambassador that first visited their homeworld. It's exceptionally dangerous. Volcanoes are still active. Their continents drift. High mountains and low valleys. Huge storms. Look, they have crazily diverse biomes, and they breathe a corrosive atmosphere that would kill most others. There is a reason they're often referred to as death breathers. If it hadn't been for the Keelan Confederation trading them internal breathing modulators, we might not have them going all over the place now. What's your point? The Zensha asked. His long nose wiggled a little. The small whiskers at the end shook with annoyance, and his hunched armored body did the same a moment later. On screen, they watched as Taran drones swarmed a massive asteroid ship and blew a hole in it while Taran Marines followed into the breach wielding plasma chainsaws. The open comms meant that the war apes' cries of bloody murder were heard across the quadrant. That, she said and shrugged, a place that kills its own species, over 99% of them, created the ultimate predator. They're the sons and daughters of the few species to survive their mass extinctions. Survival of the fittest isn't just about strength, it's about the responsiveness to change. When the Pankin pirates threatened to exterminate Taran infants to impose compliance, they changed the rules of survival. Hatred, love, wild and bloodthirsty madness. They're a species of great extremes. Maybe so, but still, the Zensha huffed, it's not very polite. Neither is declaring de facto war on the quadrant, she replied. The Keelan and the Pankin brought Terrans into the fold. We changed their games. Now they're changing ours. The Zalia have never given diplomatic ground to anyone, not in 300 cycles. But they did when the Taran diplomats boxed them in. The Zalia Queen isn't much for change, but the Taran Admiral framed it as something she knew, understood, and loved. Unity. The Keelan wanted trade, so the Terrans offered the possibility of limitless free trade. The smaller worlds want security. Just at that moment, a massive ship exploded in a burst of flame as the rods of the Taran flagship pierced a reactor. Or perhaps it detonated itself, shattering rocks and bodies out into the void to sail on forever. And they're offering their security. My point, gentlemen, isn't that the war apes are only war apes. It's their diplomats and their flexibility that makes them so dangerous. In one blow, they united the quadrant, set themselves, a relative newcomer to stellar politics, at center stage, and established themselves as war leaders as much as political power brokers. We're thinking a lot about them as war apes, and missing where their greatest strengths truly lie. In their ability to understand us all, approach us with our deepest desires, and lead us into following them. It is the peace that they will win, not just this war. And once they have it, I think we'll give this stellar hegemony, and them, not only all the power they need to rule for eons, but they'll make us think it was our own idea, and glad we did it. War apes, but peace demons. Get used to it because... She stopped as another massive ship exploded on the screen, and some of the Allied ships rushed into the gap of the field of fire while the Taran battleships provided cover. There's no getting around it after this. We'll all be their subjects, in fact, if not in name, and it's only the facts that matter. She dipped her long beak into the drink in hand and set it down on the table, empty at last. You're full of outlandish thoughts, the Zensha ambassador groused. It's an outlandish universe, and I've been right before. Just a word advice, old friend. When the Taran ambassador praises you for something, pay attention to what ideas are put into your head. I'll bet you it's something they want. She laughed and stood up. I'd best be going. My homeworld is petitioning for favored tourism status and the sweet, sweet credits that come with it. Creating that standing for trade purposes and promotion was my best idea yet. I had it while I was talking with the Taran ambassador, and now we're looking at a resource and technology exchange to facilitate it. She couldn't smile with her beak, but she gave them all a long, lingering stare to let that all sink in, and quietly made her exit. On screen, Azalia Swarm was digging into a massive ship while a Taran cruiser was picking off massive interceptors attempting to stop it. When the ship exploded, neither ambassador at the table could think of what else to say, though privately they wondered, was that really her idea, or was she giving us an example of Taran bullshit?